Hey everybody, this is David Gordon. I'm here with my brother Tim, and we are doing another episode of Rules for Retrogrades. Today we're actually here to shine light on the illicit political leanings of the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Recent news has given significant insight to just how compromised the US Bishops Conference really is. Recently, Donna Tulliver Grimes, the Associate Director of African American Affairs in the U.S. Bishops' Secretariat of Cultural Diversity in the Church, what a mouthful, has issued effusive praise for one Kamala Harris, Joe Biden's pro-choice, homosexualist, anti-Catholic running mate. While it's scandal enough for a sitting member, a sitting representative of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops to be supporting a party, the party of death, the Democrat Party, that is explicitly anti-God. Remember, this is the same party where at the convention 4 years ago, God was booed. And it's an explicitly anti-life party that pushes contraception and abortion and outsources contraception and abortion to places like Africa. It's a pro-euthanasia party. It's a pro-homosexualist party. It's an anti-family party that supports groups like Antifa and BLM. It's a Marxist party. As if it's not bad enough that we have a representative supporting the Democrat Party and basically gloating that this Kamala Harris, a far-left extremist, was named as Biden's running mate. And what she said was, she's going to represent the underrepresented. I guess not the baby in utero, but those at the margins of society, not the most defenseless, the old people being put to death through murderous euthanasia doctors, not those being put to death in their mother's wombs, assassinated. We have Tulliver Grimes praising her. And she's saying, not only did Grimes praise Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's choice, but she also was talking about our primaries, therefore outing herself as a Democrat supporter. So that's scandal. But it stands in stark contrast to the USCCB's treatment of Judy Keene, who was a public affairs director who was pushed out of her position after she proclaimed her support of Trump and, coincidentally, voiced her concerns as a Catholic about Kamala Harris 1 year ago. And it's almost 1 year ago to the day of the release of this episode that this all played out. She was, Miss Judy Keene was forced out of her position with the USCCB like that. She was put on leave like that and ultimately made to resign. And the USCCB, in the wake of Judy Keene coming out in support of Trump and against Kamala Harris, the USCCB's chief communications officer, James Rogers, issued a statement, a public statement, decrying the political activism of Judy Keene in favor of Republicans whose platform is much more aligned with Catholic social teaching and Catholic moral teaching than the Democrat. We should be mindful not to create confusion as to where the bishops might be on any particular federal policy issue. The conference is nonpartisan and does not endorse political candidates. We take this very seriously. Judy is on leave this week. So this is a gross double standard. I mean, the cat is really out of the bag as far as the USCCB goes. They are a political, partisan group. And that's not to say that every U.S. bishop is bad. They're not. I was a TA for a very faithful bishop, the Bishop of Steubenville, Jeffrey Monforton. So not all of them are bad. I'm not meaning to broad brush
the USCCB and their political advocacy. And the Kamala Harris thing makes it as clear as can be. She was blasted by a non-Catholic congresswoman for her religious bigotry against the Knights of Columbus. Harris described the Knights as an all-male society which is opposed to a woman's right to choose. This just shows that the political advocacy of the USCCB is no longer in the realm of the gray, the domain of the gray, where you'd say, well, neither party is the Catholic Confessional Party of America or anything like that. So I can pitch my vote for the one that's arguably the most Catholic. It's not the Democrats. And Kamala is at the extreme. She supported, co-sponsored the bill that would force schools to let athletes compete in girls' sports. She supported the Health and Human Services mandate by Kathleen Sebelius, which was outright religious discrimination against the Little Sisters of the Poor. It established requirements for the degree of care a health care practitioner must exercise in the event a child is born alive following an abortion or attempted abortion. And more than any of these things, Kamala Harris did not support the Born Alive Act. In other words, she wants to be able to blur the distinction, which isn't really a moral distinction that we care about, and kill babies after they're born alive. So the mask should be off. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's beyond plausible deniability. You know, with kind of these leftist and compromised bishops' organizations that try to maintain an air of political neutrality, they can only carry that on so long before sharp observers are going to be like, okay, I'm seeing the disparity in how you're treating people on the right and people on the left. And if you see this as a pattern, I mean, even the contrast here is stark enough between the treatment of Grimes and Keene, where it's like, okay, no, you know, this is non-accidental. You basically are not allowed to be an outspoken Republican. You're not allowed to be an outspoken conservative and advocate for the party who backs the policies that are very much, as I said, in keeping with Catholic social teaching, in keeping with Catholic moral teaching. Think about abortion, euthanasia, the family, anti-gay marriage, all of that stuff. You know, that is the Republican Party shares on the most important issues a common position with the Catholic Church. And you're not allowed to have that, though. You're not allowed to take those positions. You're not allowed to speak out about them if you work for the USCCB. You have to be quiet. You have to bite your tongue. You have to withhold your political opinions. And it's so perverse because then you see free rein being given to these twisted, sick liberals who just pipe off. They spout off, and they're free to advocate for the most heinous candidates, the most heinous far-left Marxist candidates being pushed by the Democrat Party under the guise of being political moderates. It's disgusting, and it shows something nefarious is happening at the USCCB. It shows that the group as a whole is compromised, and something has to be done.
Which shouldn't be surprising anymore. That's what ought to be articulated in today's Rules for Retrograde show. The mask is off. We're past the era of the political blur, the political gray, when on the one hand, we ought to be able to show that there's fudge or wriggle room for one to vote for Democrats. And B, we're past the era when the USCCB pretended or feigned political neutrality. Listen to these two paragraphs, Dave. Respond to them. This is from an article on Crisis Magazine called Defund the USCCB. Great article.
Yeah, MAFTA.
The daily operations of any vast bureaucracy require enormous sums to continue its mission and remain active in the public square, and the USCCB is no exception. In the latest financial report, which dates to 2018, we don't have a newer one, the audit disclosed total assets of the USCCB and its affiliates of $365 million, with total operating revenues, gains, and other supports of $203 million. That's a lot. That's a lot for a 501c3. That's a lot of cheddar. That's what really matters is that second figure, the $203 million, the total operating revenues.
Dude, they should have a rap video of the USCCB bishops, like throwing the money in the air, lighting it on fire, and like lighting a Black and Mild with it or whatever.
boats and ladies or what? Yeah. So this, I also want you to respond to this. I want to see your response. By far, the largest recipient of taxpayer money within the USCCB is under the umbrella of resettlement services, which is why Barron et al. Have shifted, ostensibly, the focus from the groinal issues, the life issues, to those of immigration. Resettlement Services Office is where they have their political solvency muscle. According to usaspending.gov, the USCCB received over $2 billion, not million, from the federal government between 2018 and 2015 for the purpose of refugee settlement. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was one of the 9 major recipients to have been contracted by the federal government to, quote, resettle refugees in asylums, as stated by James Simpson of Foundation Watch in a piece for Capital Research Center. It's a lot of chatter.
Right. Yeah, no, if you want to develop a motive for something, I mean, because obviously, aside from just what we can say is a widespread infiltration, either on purpose or just because it's closeted homosexuals attacking the priesthood, we know that the clergy have been largely compromised, but there's also a motive for them to moderate or move left, because the left holds the reins of power in society. So if the USCCB wants to cuddle up and chase down these funds by cuddling up with the prevailing leftists, with the reigning leftists, the powers that be, then they do need to pivot away from life issues, and they need to go towards these the seamless garment analysis of social issues in especially America, because we're talking within the realm of American politics here. And I think that's what's been going on. You know, they want to moderate to get so they can be getting plaudits from the left, to be getting donations, grants from the left. And I think that's what they're chasing down.
Yeah, without a doubt. So this is what we're willing to say here today. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is not on the non-equitable end of an ambiguous political spectrum wherein a reasonable party could judge that Republicans or political conservatives better are the more Catholic appropriate vote. That's not what we're talking about anymore. We're not talking about the 1970s or 80s, even though both of those were in the post-Roe era, which pretty much puts it beyond dispute. No, we're talking about Kamala Harris, who is to the left of Barack Hussein Obama, and both of them are the furthest left political candidates we've ever had in the vice presidential or presidential equipoise, right? So Obama and Harris, and both of them also have this nice parity that they are strongly pro-abortion, strongly against the life issue, so much so they believe you can kill live human babies. And we don't need to distinguish morally, because there is no distinction. But it matters to the average squishy IQ 95 American moderate voter that cares about those sorts of things, I guess, right?
Yeah, the location of the murder. Like if it's murdered outside the womb, that's, you know, you got it. You should be in prison for that. But if you take the baby and just place it inside the womb and then smash its skull and cut it up and suck out its brains, then you're cool. That's just a woman's choice, dog. That's how they roll.
It's women's health.
Women's health,
it's her health.
Of course. Well, as they're cutting up like the woman baby, they're like, this is woman's health. You gotta, when you're cutting up the woman baby, as long as the mother is okay and can go party and hook up with some more dudes, then it's all good.
As long as it's promoting hooking up with dudes. Look, Harris described the Knights of Columbus, who are not like based hardcore traddies or anything. They're generally speaking old fat boomers, right? That wear funny hats. And sometimes they're really cool guys, but they're not super hardcore Catholic. They're just the Knights of Columbus. She described them as an all-male society, like the Proud Boys or something, which is opposed to a woman's right to choose. So Kamala Harris, supported indirectly yet openly by the USCCB, by their decision, their abstinence against firing
Grimes.
Grimes.
Tulliver Grimes, actually. But I only give him the one last name. The broads who are like, well, I got married, but I'm going to retain my premarital identity and eschew my husband's headship. It's like, no. You get one. You're not. I'm not going to do you the courtesy of being like, oh, Myth Tulliver Grimes. That's a mouthful. You're Grimes. That's what you get.
I'll go with that. I'll buy. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just saying, people, this is on the other side. It's on the business end of what you might adjudge with your prudence, one way or the other, reasonably. She hates the Knights of Columbus as if they're the most hardcore, rad-trad, Catholic, based in red-pilled, boys club society that's on the cutting edge of Catholic social teaching, pushing it back where it belongs in the right. She's treating the Knights of Columbus this way, and she says openly, Kamala Harris, I'm doing this because I'm so fervidly pro-abortion. This is beyond the pale.
No. And again, what just strikes me, and what should strike everybody, because it's indubitable, the double standard that you get held to as a member of a conservative party with versus being a member of a progressive party. And it pervades Western society, but what's frightening is that it has even infiltrated the church. It's made its way into the church, and that shows you, these are the same people who are drafting statements to the American faithful. These are the same people who are setting the policy agenda for the American church, and who are kind of, the same bishops that are forming priests, instructing priests, giving priests orders. They're the same ones who won't let you speak out in favor of the party of life, but are absolutely silent when you speak out in the favor of the party of death. And that shows why we are at where we are as a church. That shows why the American liturgy is so banal and insipid. That shows why we can't hear a good homily, why you have to sit around and abide a priest talking to you about love in the homily and driving like a Christian and making sure that you go home and compliment your family 10 times, instead of actually giving an exposition of the gospel in the day's readings and, using the liturgy as the privileged place of catechesis. That's not what's happening. And it's no surprise, because you have now the inmates running the asylum. You have now I'm not saying all of them. Again, I'm not broad brushing, but some of the bad guys are at the helm of the ship. And at least there's enough. It used to be that in the church, the bad guys had to stay quiet and kind of operate in the shadows, like they did at Vatican II, using talismanic speech, words that could be interpreted equivocally. So you had the Coons and the Congars and the Rawners and the bishops that were complicit with them, kind of hiding in the shadows and throwing out talismanic speech and watchwords as a bone to the progressive church so they could make hay later. But now they are emboldened. They're ready to come out, right, Tim? They're not fearing punishment or reprisal. They're not fearing blowback at all, which means that even if they're not a majority in the USCCB, which, some people would say that they are, but they are a very strong and powerful minority, so that they are not fearing pushback. Is that a wrong analysis?
Well, a couple things that I'm not sure if it's a misspeak or a genuine point of departure between me and you. It's getting pretty nitty gritty, but we don't even have to quantify when we talk metonymously, when we use a metonymy, right? And we say USCCB acted such and thus.
The entire metonymy. I don't know what that means.
What it means is the entire organization elected thus and such course of action and supports the Democrat Party and is on the take from the Democrat Party, particularly through PICO, which is organized by Francis's best friend, Cardinal Maradiaga, who runs PICO, People Organizing Communities. And that's global. That's all over the West, which brings me to point two. This isn't just in America. All of the bishops, so it's not just that the USCCB speaks with one voice and that the USCCB takes these unilateral actions. I don't really care if there are individual bishops that are not on board. The United States Conference of Bishops is bad, and so are almost all of the European ones. They're all rotten to the core, meaning there's a meta-organizational principle hovering somewhere above. And the question, point three, since you brought it up regarding Vatican II, my third point is where it's shrouded in mystique. Where does that organizational principle operate from? Where's the nexus? I had a great talk with our friend Plants, the ginger, the other day on the phone, and I think I was finally getting through to him. And he was saying, "You're finally getting through to me." And Richard Declue, we were on a three-way talk about at the council itself. It operates how I think the corresponding action between the national bishop conferences operate. I don't know exactly how, but there has to be an email that goes out that says, we're all doing this. We're all going to be in bed with the left-wing parties in this Catholic spring, the way Podesta described it in 2016. This Catholic spring means all over the West, all of the bishops' conferences jointly and severally will be working with the left in their political situation across Europe and America mostly. And again, final thought here to sum all that up, and it does have to do with the way things operated at Vatican II and how things operate over the globe now with the bishops' conferences. If you're a teacher and every kid at 257 on the nose, or 28 out of 30 kids, the bishops, push their binder off and do a binder drop, and you don't say that you don't acknowledge there's some organizational principle, that there's some email that went out or something, whether or not it's in the Vatican documents, whether or not it's in the official papers of the USCCB, it probably wouldn't be, then you're foolish. This is not a coincidence. If you just think it's a coincidence, everyone happened to drop their binder, 28 out of 30 kids in your classroom, at 257 on the nose, then you ought not to be teaching. So there's some superstructure here. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm ever saying.
Well, it seems like the left has been really successful at basically relegating conservatism and conservative speech to the margins in society. And you see it with, for example, like a bakery. If you want to make a homosexual bakery bake you a Christian catechism cake, they're free to be like, no, and by virtue of you asking me this, you are discriminating against me, the baker. But then if a homosexual couple goes to a Christian bakery and is like, bake me a homosexualist cake, a gay-affirming cake, and that if the Christian baker says no, then again, the homosexuals say this is discrimination. So they win both ways. And you kind of see it like that. That's just an example to illustrate this paradigm. The left has been very, very successful at making conservatism seem dirty, making it seem bad and wrong, like you're being a naughty boy, like a retrograde or a bag of deplorables if you support these causes. So I'm not altogether sure if there's a memo or if this is just we're seeing the fruits of a culture that's been overrun with a Marxist narrative for 50 years without significant conservative pushback. They have gotten no pushback. They took the culture, they ripped it from our hands so quickly. We went from the 1950s to the 1960s. That's 10 years. That's a decade. And this 50s, 60s dyad, it's stark. It's a stark contrast. So I don't know. I'm still open on that question.
Yeah, well, there's mystique. That's the whole point. And I never buy that the early part of the 20th century is, virgin fingers clean. It's right. It's not, because I'm researching this other book. I'm writing 2 books now. One of them is essentially an infiltration book, deep dive into the deep sources. And this stuff went back way earlier than even Gregory the 16th. This stuff goes back prior to even Pius the 9th. Because people know and then forget in these conversations. Most traditional-minded Catholics know Leo the 13th, Pius the 10th. We're talking about it 10 years before, 10 years after the turn of the century. No. It goes back to early 1800s when Pius the 9th's Cardinal Secretary of State was warning him that this is coming. So we're talking before 1850, before the 1840s. We're talking the 18 teens and 20s. There were organized factions of radicals who were organizing against the mainstream church, which at that point was still retrograde. So I don't think it was the 1960s. The church still had the appearance until roughly the council. And this is what confuses so many people, along with the intentionalism, textualism dichotomy, which is a tough one unless you study jurisprudence. But, the council documents and all that's for another show. And I've talked about it a lot lately. But that confuses people about the council. But what really confuses them is the coming out party was the council.
Right.
And so, but I mean, it had been planned for over 100 years. And again, they made sure, I'll call it the protection of the Holy Spirit, that in the council documents, everyone's had their fill of this for the last 3 weeks because everyone's been talking about it. But the council documents are a different thing. They made sure that they did their codified heteropraxy through weaponized ambiguity in a way where the documents wouldn't be ipso facto null. Right. But the point is that was the appearance change. Sorry.
That's absolutely right. People think, and they point to, the church has fallen apart in the post-conciliar age, so it must therefore be the documents themselves. It must be the council itself. The church was falling apart. It had been under attack for long before, Vatican II. Obviously, there were faithful prelates there, but there were also a cabal of guys that were trying to do nefarious things and write in ambiguous words so that they could cling to orthodoxy while still ushering in heterodoxy. So Vatican II is not in and of itself, I remind people of this all the time, responsible necessarily for the floor falling out in church attendance and people's faith in the Eucharist, and just any number of theological issues where we've seen widespread dissent in the post-conciliar age. The church had been undermined before that, and like Tim said, I think that was a turning point. It was a turning point for the church where this stuff could come more into the open, and you could have people talking about the spirit of Vatican II. But the church was in trouble before that. It had been undermined for long before. And even when Bishop Barron addressed this stuff, did you see his Q&A? I'm not sure about the Second Vatican Council, because he had kind of been an act of acknowledgement that there's been a lot of discussion, and some with decent intellectual underpinnings. He came out and released through his Word on Fire org that a Q&A on Vatican II, and a lot of it was actually very theologically accurate. The one dodge he made there was when people talk, he even talks about weaponized ambiguity in the Q&A, and he pivots away from it. He dodges that. He basically refuses to countenance it, because I think his refusing to go head-to-head with it and meet the term weaponized ambiguity head on in the documents, I think is a tacit admission that there was some of that.
Well, I was working out last week, and I listened to a show he did on, I don't think it was his Q&A, but no, where he is useful, obviously wrong, but useful, is that he acknowledges, this is actually in his video he did in, I think, late 2018, that Marshall and I responded to. He admitted there were three parties at Vatican II, and he's really specific as to who is in what party. He acknowledges that the straight up Thomist party had almost no one in it, aside from Garrigou-Lagrange and the Garrigou-Lagrangites. Ottaviani was there.
Ottaviani. Yeah.
But this is why there's paltry few votes against most of the documents. When I defend the documents, I always say, hey, I wouldn't have voted for this. You should, because I'm a constitutional scholar. I know how conventions are supposed to work. The Anti-Federalists nearly overtook the votes for ratifying the federal constitution state by state. It was something like 89 to 80 was the final vote on ratification in the Virginia House, nearly 50-50, 53-47 by percentage or something like that. It's bizarre that all of those sacred constitutions were ratified, as Barron points out, like 1,000 to 5. That's really weird. He acknowledges the party of Thomists, who are the right ones, and he admits he's in the von Balthasar party, the neo guys, the new theology guys. They did not like straight up Thomas. They like this new version of Thomas where not everyone goes to hell. That's what it boiled down to for them, and that was their intent. And he's really honest about it. So there are three parties. There's almost no one in the conservative parties, even popular heroes of the council, who most of them voted for the documents, which is kind of a laugh when you think about it. But the point is, Barron's really honest about the fact that at the council, the most rightward leaning branch, that middle kind of new theology branch, Bouillet and de Lubac and von Balthasar and Ratzinger were in, they did not like the old Thomas that was represented by Garrigou-Lagrange, the manualist. They didn't like that. That was too old. They want something new. Even Ed Penton admitted to me, I thought it was funny, there's probably a component of this German theologian in Ratzinger, Benedict, who wanted to retire and come up with novelty. The German theologians are. So anyway, it's a whole, this isn't a Vatican II show, but the council, interestingly enough, did create under the motu proprio, by Paul VI, Ecclesiae Sanctae, the establishment of the national bishops' conferences, and they use all the same tricks that were, I think, in use at the council, where it doesn't matter whether it's a majority or a minority majority. They rule and they silence all the opposition, and there doesn't seem to be much true Thomistic conservative opposition.
I don't necessarily have a problem with there being the national conferences of bishops. I don't think it's altogether a bad idea, just like there is a papal ambassador from various countries. What's the problem is when you have unfaithful, right? That's the problem. When you have, by hook or by crook, people worming their way up to the head of these organizations that aren't faithful, that aren't sons of the church. Like there would be, if it was the USCCB was made up of all Cardinal Burkes, we'd be cheering it on, because they actually have a decent amount of sway with the Vatican to be like, okay, Americans are fed up with communion in the hand. We want to walk this back. We don't want these exceptions. We want to do things the old school way. Even having a synodal church, one that like gets the pulse of a certain region and says, okay, what are the theological issues or cultural issues that we need to dedicate time to that the Pope can write on? That's not necessarily a bad thing if you have a good Pope, if you have a faithful Pope who's really going to be like, okay, the prison system in like South Africa is bad, it's corrupt, so we're going to write a encyclical dedicated to corruption and rooting it out in the penal system. There's something to that. But the way it's come down and the way that the left has used these things and has weaponized these things to their benefit is by getting their plants in there and kind of poisoning these institutions from the inside out. If there were a way to hedge that, if there were a way to prevent that, I think the idea behind these things, instead of just having a strictly centralized church, and I'm not talking about stripping authority from the Pope, because obviously we all know that would be a horrible thing. That would be a heterodox thing. That would be heteropraxy, and it's not part of the tradition. You know, Peter is the chief of the apostles. So obviously the Pope is always going to be Christ's vicar on earth who reigns supreme and no one judges the Pope and all that stuff. But if we have the Pope who is well informed by groups of ambassadors from all around the world, then he's going to be able to dedicate the church's efforts and energies and resources to tackling problems that might be plaguing locales. That's not altogether bad. It's just been weaponized.
Yeah, well, we don't have, we're 30 minutes in. I think a full-on debate on this is important. I hear from a lot of traditionalists a point that they take issue with my book, Catholic Republic. What I push for is the opposite of what you just described. And I think USCCB is the paradigm example of what would happen. We've never really had the bishops' conferences work out. It's always been bad. But that's just as applied. You're saying there's an as applied version where it's but here's in theory why I think it's bad. What I'm all about, my whole program, and I the trads don't like this. Whether they know it or not, a lot of trads would agree with what you just described. I push for politically balkanization. Break it all up. I believe in republics and or whatever of the other good forms of regime you want at the local level. But religiously, theologically, unitization, the opposite. I want to push all of that back to the center. I don't think we need 21 rites for the Mass or whatever. I think Catholic means Catholic means Catholic. I think the four marks of the church, the precepts of the church are all about unitization. One language for the liturgy. And so that's why I do think it should be in Latin. And whatever, unitization is good. I don't know why you need bishops' conferences. They've never produced good fruit, and I don't think they can. I just don't believe in an admin state. I've seen what it does in U.S. government. That's really the all-powerful fourth branch of government. It's bloated. It's corrupt. It's driven by solvency concerns, but really, really fattening programs dressed up as solvency concerns. And you just end up chasing around money. It's bred in circuses, and it does democratize the bishops in ways they shouldn't be. And it provides this means by which a majority, or just a majority that's not total, ends up forcing out any opposition because of the money. I just say, I don't know what good comes from it. They can write the Holy Father all the time. We've had papal nuncios long before there was an administrative national system for bishops' conferences. But I understand there's probably things I'm not seeing on the
Yeah,
other
just
side.
obviously, as you know, even in America, with like people who adhere closely to the Federalist system, you know, we see that a large centralized government, although you do need that federal apparatus, you do need a federal government. Ultimately, things often are best handled at the local level. And sometimes you need people, local advocates, to be in the federal government, i.e., like the House of Representatives, and represent somebody's interests at the national level. So that's what I'm saying. It could work out if only. I think this was the main issue with the Second Vatican Council, and this is a whole other can of worms, but John the 23rd, I believe, acknowledged this. He thought, when he called for the Second Vatican Council, that the church was in a much healthier place than it actually was. So a lot of the things that came in the wake of the Second Vatican Council came because the church itself was sick at that time. It was a sick church. But yeah,
He said
USCCB.
Giornamento. I mean, as an Italian speaker, I know aggiornamento means we're going to renew this thing. We're going to recycle it and make it new. He wanted something brand new. And well, at any rate, I say dichotomy. Yeah, at the level of republic, you want to break things down. Localism, subsidiarity, balkanization, break it all up, have all the muscle be at the low. That doesn't hold for the one true faith, the Roman Catholic faith. Everything's supposed to be centralized. And all of the marks of the church support that idea that you don't really need subsidiarity within power structures within the one true by necessity monarchy.
It's more of an advisory model, and that's what honestly
it chases the money.
In practice that is what it's been. And I was looking at this for even the feminism book research, dude. The USCCB, when it was still in its kind of inchoate form, had penned a treatise on the family, talking about like the new family and the new world and praising the working woman and stuff. So it's had problems for a long time. So I don't have much confidence in it. Which brings us to kind of how we're going to conclude today. What do we do about this? What is it that you as the laity, because people are just frustrated. This is why we're so dispirited. People feel disenfranchised. They feel disenchanted because they listen to podcasts like this. They get educated on what's going on in the church. They get educated on what's going on in the world, and they're tuned in. And since they're men of goodwill, tuning in, they're not just listening for education. They're not just listening for intellectual stimulation. While that stuff's good, they're also listening to be like, okay, how can I be a warrior for Christ? How can I be, as a disciple of Christ, go out and take what I've learned intellectually and put it into practice? And there's a growing feeling of frustration in the West because we feel like the culture is so overrun and we have been relegated to the margins and marginalized to such an extent that we feel like we can't fight back, that there's nothing to do. So how do we fight back against the powers that have a death grip on the church, that have a stranglehold on the church's throat? How do we fight them back? And this is rules for retrogrades type stuff. You do to them what they did to us. Liberals, progressives, Marxists have been so good at getting their way because they know what strings to pull. They know that if you want to affect a change, money talks. So what do? Right now, I want everybody to write the USCCB. Note the disparity between the treatment of Keene and Grimes and be like, you're not going to see another dollar of mine until you right this ship. If you're really that serious, the policy as you've advocated it, the policy as you've spoken it, as you've made it explicit through your mouthpiece, is that the USCCB, the employees of the USCCB are not going to be giving outspoken political opinions. Then that needs to be applied. I don't think that's right. I think if you have a conservative employee at the USCCB, since conservatism is in keeping with Catholic moral theology, they should be applauded if they speak out in favor of the party of life, i.e. Republicans, over the party of death, i.e. Democrats. But if you're going to have that policy, which I think is dumb, then you need to apply it. You need to be held accountable when you transgress it. And, we're not going to live under a two-tiered system of justice, one for conservatives and one for liberals. So I want everybody to write a letter, call them, and say, you're not going to see one dime of my money for any of your initiatives until you get rid of this heretic, this lousy Catholic who's on record supporting an infanticidal, feminist, homosexualist, Marxist candidate, is scandalized, 300 million Americans by speaking out in favor of this wicked lady. Get rid of her. You're not going to see my money. It's not enough just to what Tim talks about in Rules for Retrogrades, the monolithic boycott where you're just like, well, I'm privately just not going to drink Starbucks now. That doesn't work. You have to write Starbucks and be like, I'm never going to drink your product again, and all of my friends aren't either, and all of their friends aren't either. You're going to take a hit. You're going to pay for this. It's the same with this. You can't just not pay the USCCB. You can't not tithe to them or whatever you're doing. You have to let them know you're not going to see $1 of my money. You're going to take a huge hit of the pocketbooks, and I'm going to tell all of my friends this, and we're all going to organize and sink you. And then you're going to see movement.
Yeah. They shouldn't see another red cent of yours. Their collections are way, 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 way down in 2019 and 2020, probably because of the summer of shame. But look at those figures I read out again. The big one, the disclosed total assets was 365 million of USCCB. The really important figure is the total operating revenues gains of the supports, 203 million. That's a lot. I guess that would include what we can affect by not giving to them. But look at what they're on the take from the U.S. government, 2 billion. That's not in a year, that's between 2008 and 2015, but it's a much bigger portion of their the equivalent of their outlays. They're on the take. So we can't affect that much change. Here's what I would say. Don't give your money, but all those people out there that are not understanding the dichotomy between the way that theology works, which is the one true by necessity monarchy in the world. When you get a good king, great. Good kings happen about 1 in 10, according to all the people that have studied monarchies, particularly in the late medieval period. 1 in 10 are good. If you love monarchy, like all these LARPs out there, 9 out of 10 times you get mediocre or worse. And when you get an outright tyrant in the seat or in the chair of Peter, which is what we have now, we have an outright tyrant, there's nothing you can do. So again, get your head, people, around the dichotomy. We want balkanization, all that, the right kind of power to the people, the right kind of Thomistic popular sovereignty at the level of the Republic. We want that balkanization. At the level of theology, we can't have it. That's actually what the liberals, that's what Ronner was pushing for before the council. And there's nothing we can do. We can't really disagree about that. This is the one true regime, the Roman Church, that must be a kind of divine right monarchy, which is a Protestant idea to bring into the secular world, the divine right monarchy. It must be a king. And so when you have a bad king that's allowing this stuff, that's really advocating this stuff, making it happen, you're going to suffer. So we're going to suffer here. Don't give your money, but there's nothing you can do under Pope Francis the Humble. There's nothing you can do. And the USCCB. Yeah.
Good.
No, I was just saying that they're chasing the money. They're subsidized by the U.S. federal government. That's why Francis, in collusion with all of the bishops' conferences in Europe, the bishops' conference in Canada and the United States, are all about immigrants. They don't want to talk about the real life issues anymore. They're against them, these homosexual bishops. And the parties that support them, that prop them up, in the case that the lay people stop funding them, which is happening 2019 and 2020, those candidates hate the life issues because they're secular radicals. And so they're still propped up. We're not going to be able to completely defund them. That's one more reason. That's why I read at the beginning, the portion of their outlays, or whatever you call it, with an administrative ecclesial body, what portion of their outlays are earned through donations at the parish level, and or Peter's pence or whatever at the supernatural level, and what portion of them are just given to them by the federal government. They're on the take for their one world government, destroy the borders, immigration program, Agenda 2030.
Dude, it's actual, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, one of the USCCB's charity wings, is actually giving money to Black Lives Matter. By a group started by two Marxist a group started by two Marxist lesbians with the with the specific purpose of overthrowing the traditional Western family. And really bringing about a Marxist utopia in the West. And of course, we know that communism is intrinsically evil. Various popes have written about this, decrying it. It's in the first section of the Catechism. Marxism is evil. It destroys God. It destroys private property. Obviously, you need both things. So this is who the USCCB is giving your money to. It should make
socialism too. Socialism is decried in Quadragesima. One cannot at the same time be a good Catholic and a socialist, not just the Marxist wing that they always distinguish. Paragraph, I used to have it memorized, 62 in Quadragesima. Sorry.
Yeah, you think that's even, it's spoken of in the church, even too high of taxes basically take what the workman has rightfully earned. So definitely. But that's where we're at right now. That's where the USCCB is. And of course, I want to assuage some people's consciences because there is this duty that exists to support the church. You have a duty. You're supposed to support the parish that you go to financially. It's a Catholic duty. But that doesn't mean you have to be stupid with your money. Certain times, desperate times call for desperate measures. And while you can still give money to the church and finance it in healthy ways, finance healthy branches of the church, donate and be generous with your money, that doesn't mean you have to take it and give it to the den of thieves that is taking your money and funding evil Marxist groups intent on destroying the West with it.
The church means all of us. So just give it to a troubled person at your parish. That's really that's the obvious solution, because so many of the parishes are corrupt. It is such a majority of you didn't want to call out all the bishops by name. It's not some weirdly, mystically controlling governing minority of the USCCB. It's all, 95% or better of the parishes around. So you can't trust them. I'm in a new area looking for a good parish. Give to the people, because after all, Vatican II, it stands for we're all the church. So, it's not a silly thing. I'm walking proof, right? I am walking proof how much people help me. I'm a church. I'm not a church man. I'm a layman. But I am a part of the church, says Vatican II. And people were really, really generous and protected. They circled the wagons. They were following rules for retrograde. So,
dude, that's hugely important. I've got to say something. In the wake of Gaudium et Spes, where the clergy has really punted to the laity this duty of evangelizing the world, guys, and I would ask you right now, especially, this is a good kind of segue. Please support our work here. Support our Patreons. We have to be out there doing the work that the clergy was doing before. Even Bishop Barron, when the statues were coming under attack, it's like, you go protect the statues. That's your job. That's the lady. It's like, okay, well, we need help. It costs money. It costs money to get equipment. It costs money to keep the lights on. It takes time for us away from our families to do these things. It takes, for every hour that you see of a show, there's lots of preparation that goes into that and lots of work after the fact that goes into actually publishing it and posting it for consumption. So you have to understand, people want people to be championing the faith and going out there and defending the faith, but you really do need to help us and support us. And obviously, Tim, you are living, walking proof that people are generous and good, and we're very much thankful for that. But please keep supporting us. One instance, I'm going to give a quick plug then. My wife, Rebecca, and I are doing a homeschooling class. It's a Catholic home economics class where we're teaching household management, time management, what the traditional Catholic family looks like, how it can operate in the 21st century world, and also how to homeschool and build your own successful curriculum to implement it and get your kids ahead. Because I was a headmaster of a Catholic academy, and kids had come in after studying Latin supposedly for 8 years and couldn't conjugate an ARE verb in the present tense. So there's a need out there for that. That's one way you can support us. Tim, you have your classes too. The church history, Aristotle, Catholic Republic, and I know you're filling up for those. So maybe we'll put our website links where people can join at the bottom of the page. And also, please
mine's
subscribe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll put that in show notes.
people already know this, but that was the most watched video ever on this channel, was my plea to Bishop Barron in late June, early July. Lots watched that. People, little update since Dave brought it up. Shocker, he hasn't responded. He says, I don't want to go fight BLM. The laity should do this. And I just that month been fired by his brother Bishop. They know each other well. Joseph Brennan had fired me for doing precisely what Bishop Barron was paying lip service to. Unfortunately, de dicto and de facto don't always meet up for Bishop Barron. They almost never do. And he didn't even see fit to respond to me, right? He was very close friends with Bishop Brennan, who fired me for doing precisely what he said.
I didn't even think about that, dude. You bit the bullet from a diocese for going out there and fighting these battles. So that's what I'm saying.
So Dave, watch that video. That video went big.
Well, I was moving, dude, and like settling into a place. I didn't have internet for some time, but you see what happens. Guys, we need your support. If you're going to punt it like the clergy has to the laity, then that means where people were supporting the church so generously before, which, again, you have a duty under the moral law to do. You know, it's part of that.
Precepts of the church.
Yeah, it's part of the precepts of the church that you have to do this. If, as Gaudium et Spes says, the laity is taking on this new role in evangelizing the world and really holding some of these lines, please also be generous with us.
Right. We need to close. Last thought here, I promise. What we need to do that I've been thinking of a lot is, because of like it or lump it, you're going to be more affirmative of Gaudium et Spes. I'm going to be more skeptical, obviously. But like it or lump it, evangelization, and you're going to be probably mildly more optimistic about the prospect of the new evangelization. Whatever it is, whatever you feel about it, how traditional minded you are, who cares? That's the case. It's with us to stay that the laity are now the only people that are going to be evangelizing the world. The bishops have given up. They're corrupt. They're bloated. A lot too many of them are running around doing corrupt, bloated things. Homosexualists, lots of them. They don't give a damn about evangelizing the world. So it has fallen to us. We don't have to wring our hands over this. We know it. It's what I'm doing for a living now. And you and all the other apostolates, they're all lay apostolates. Now, what I want to talk about that we need to do a video on is a serious scholarly discussion of the two wings of the lay part of the church, the cradle Catholics, like me and Dave, and most cradle Catholics who are faithful, who were raised in the 70s, 80s, 90s, are reverts, cradle reverts, right? Because we are so poorly formed, versus the converts to the church, reverts and converts. And it's not versus, both have the equivalence of charisms. If we were like the bishops, we have the equivalence of charisms. There's room for us all. But really in the 90s, early 2000s, like 95% of the lay evangelizers in the Catholic Church were all converts. And I would argue, I want to do a video on this, Dave, maybe later this week. It's filtered in a major way into the discussion, particularly on Twitter, that for so long our Protestant converted to Catholic convert lay evangelizers with apostolates were the only voices you were hearing. There are strengths and weaknesses with each approach.
Right.
So,
right.
And I want to talk about that in a really dispassionate way and get people thinking. I've made reference in some of my solo videos. I wanted to do a whole video. I think it would be a good one for us to spitball. We'll probably do that later this week. But it is true, with Gaudium et Spes and a bunch of other reasons, this has fallen to the laity, guys like us and other apostolates out there that are listened to. So we need to talk about the situation at hand, 50-50 or whatever, converts, reverts. I think it's going to be a good show. It describes a lot of the acrimony among faithful Catholics.
Dude, just on that note, like, if you're out there as a member of the laity, the priests and bishops, even if they're saying something on hardcore Orthodox conservative that cuts against the grain of the culture, they have the protection of the collar. It's not so easy to just oust them. But guys like me and Tim, we are always at the mercy of a public outcry. People are always gunning for our jobs. They're always gunning to get faithful voices silenced. And you see it all over the place, either with just various forms of economic coercion or soft coercion, or even the left yelling shame and shame, shame at you. But they're always trying to silence you. And if you don't support the laity when they're out there and trying to engage with the culture and convert it and bring back the old guard, the good way, the Orthodox Church, if you don't support them, then their voices are going to be stifled and stanched and silenced in the end. So again, we need your support. We're always one call away from basically destitution. So that's the other thing. The clergy, they don't need to make a living wage. They don't need to work for their families, because obviously they're celibate and they're single men, and some of them have vows of poverty. But guys like Tim and me, we have families. We have to support our loved ones while we are, with our livings, with our wages, and to be attacked and silenced and economically shut down is absolutely devastating to us. So please just keep that in mind.
They seem to get it. Well, we should do that show soon, because it's much needed, and we won't hit you up with the Patreon, donor box, whatever. Again, people always know, and we always put those up there. But the best way to do it now is to take the classes, because it's 4 really good classes. It's not like a formal institute. We're going to get going. My classes get going in September. Dave's get going the following month. But it's all really relevant stuff, and it's all me reacting to a need for a popular demand, and you too. But
dude, this is coming up. It's going to be a great next show then, because it's coming up to Halloween, which is one of the main victims, I think, not in terms of importance, but in terms of visibility of the kind of Protestant converts flooding into the church, because then you have the watering down of Halloween.
Yeah. Cool. Well, see to our Patreon accounts, see to our websites, and thanks everyone. Please remember, when you click like and you subscribe, the most important one after that is clicking the bell so you get notifications, because if you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel but don't get notified when it's coming up, then you're going to miss all of the shows. It's fun to have people on there for the live premieres. So bell, like, and of course subscribe before you do either of those 2 things. We'll see you real soon, Dave. Mississippi side.
Yeah, school starts tomorrow for both of us. I was sitting around depressed playing video games all day.